Food is a bit of a theme today, and Margot is going to come and bring our reading to us today. The reading is from John chapter 6, beginning at verse 1. After this, Jesus crossed over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias. A huge crowd kept following him wherever he went, because they saw his miraculous signs as he healed the sick. Then Jesus climbed a hill and sat down with his disciples around him. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all these people?" He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, "Even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them." Then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Well, what good is that with this huge crowd?" "Tell everyone to sit down," Jesus said. So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks to God, and distributed them to the people. Afterward, he did the same with the fish, and they all ate as much as they wanted. After everyone was full, Jesus told his disciples, "Now, gather up the leftovers so that nothing is wasted." So they picked up the pieces and filled 12 baskets with scraps left by the people who had eaten from the 5 barley loaves. Thank you, Margot, for our reading today. Wherever Jesus went, it seems a crowd was not far behind. Up a mountain, across a lake, they followed. Why? Well, simple answer is because he did miraculous things and he spoke words of life. They wanted to see what Jesus was going to do next, and they wanted to hear those words of life. He restored hope, and he gave people dignity within their circumstances. No one was ever beneath him, and no one was beyond his touch. He saw their needs, visible and invisible, and he answered the prayers of their hearts to be healed, to be restored, forgiven. And so the story recounted here by John was actually no different. The crowds flocked to hear Jesus' words of life and to witness the healing of the sick. And we saw earlier on that Jesus took the disciples and they went up a mountain, but the crowd followed. Presumably they had been there all day. It was a huge crowd. John says 5,000 men, huge crowd. And it seems none of them was prepared for such a long day out. And evening drew near, and they were far from food, and they were probably hungry. Well, the disciples actually had no idea what to do with them. And as Philip pointed out, even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them. The problem was huge. They had no money, but was there the food in the local district anyway to buy food for all of these people? The only source of food, it seems, or the only source of food willing to be given to Jesus was the 5 loaves and 2 fish. The young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But as Simon Peter said, what good's that with this huge crowd? It's a boys' lunch. It's not going to feed 5,000 men and the women and the children. The gift of food was minuscule compared to the size of the crowd. And into this, Peter must have thought somewhere, what can Jesus do? Jesus will do something, surely. So he brought the young boy to Jesus. And that young boy was prepared to generously give the little he had to Jesus. Now think about it, he could have thought, actually my mum's packed me this lunch and I'm going to eat it because I'm really, really hungry. I mean, if you've gone out with children, you know, if they're hungry, that's it, they'll eat it. They're not thinking, oh, I'll give it all away. That's not how children work. But this young boy did. He was moved, presumably by God. And Peter found him, and Peter brought him to Jesus. And there it is, isn't it? The answer to the problem. In Jesus' hands, the size of the offering was actually immaterial, but the willingness of the boy to be part of the answer was all that was required for Jesus to be able to perform this miracle. And his blessing multiplied the offering beyond everyone's wildest dreams. Not only did everyone there have enough to eat, but there was enough left over to feed even more people. Whether that was the people who had come and followed Jesus and they had something to take home for the next day, perhaps it was, we don't really know who were the beneficiaries of this abundance. But Jesus said they ate all that they wanted and that gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted. So if nothing is wasted, it was going to be given to somebody else. There are many problems in this world that are overwhelmingly large or complex. There are problems within our community, within our country and across the globe. And we may feel like Philip, well, I could work and work and work, but what can I do? That I can never raise enough money by myself to solve the problem. They might think about this, as Simon Peter said, well, I've got a little bit here, but what good will that do to the size of the problem? But so it may be beyond our capabilities to solve the whole problem on our own. But actually we're not asked to do that. This young boy brought his loaves and fishes to Jesus. And he left them with Jesus, for Jesus to perform the miracle. And so it is with us. We bring what we have. We bring items of food. Together, we are feeding families. Jesus is blessing that food, and people are not going hungry because of that food. It's not that we've got to supply a weekly, we can supply a weekly shop, that will be incredibly generous and very well received, but we don't, that's not what we can do. We don't have to do that, and we don't have to feel guilty for not doing that. Jesus does ask us to offer what we have, and he wants us to be willing to offer what we have. Because the key thing is, of course, it's Jesus that multiplies. And it's God that answers the prayers of those who are suffering. In faith, we offer what we can. We offer it where we can and when we can to our God, who looks upon our world with compassion and with a desire to bring hope and healing in all circumstances. As a church community, we've been here over 30 years, and I've been in church meeting here for over 30 years. Not obviously with our current name, but there was a church here before, which is the bedrock and formed the foundation of the church and the community that we enjoy today. And we have a history of supporting those in need, locally, through our gifts through the food bank, our funding and support for the youth project, our toddler group, and Young at Heart, and our support for the night shelter, to name the more obvious ones, things that we have done and we continue to do. Well, actually, there are countless other small acts of generosity, grace and love given by individuals and by families that actually most of us are unaware of. And globally, we've supported the work of Tearfund for almost 20 years, and Compassion for certainly more than 10.
Through our gifts of prayer and money, numerous communities have been blessed and lifted out of poverty. The love of God has been shown, lives have been changed, and hope has been restored. Through individual and group sponsorship via compassion, 6, 7, 8 children around the globe have been enabled to go to school. Their families have been fed and their communities have benefited too. 4 of them are graduating from the scheme in the next few years, with hopes and dreams for a future that would have been beyond them without the intervention of our gifts and without the intervention of compassion. And so it continues, and we hope that this year will be no different. And as we participate in Tearfund's Harvest Appeal this year, we know that our gifts of money, large and small, and just as important, our prayers, will be part of God's answer to the poorest people in Nepal, not only bringing new farming techniques to the farmers, but also restoring hope and bringing life back to their communities. We'll move the next slides. Okay, so I thought, now I've been a Tearfund rep here and supported Tearfund before moving here, so I've probably supported Tearfund for the last 25 years. And it's very easy for me to know, I know all about Tearfund, but then I forget that not everybody else does. So I've just got a few slides here, a little bit about Tearfund. So what is Tearfund? Some of you may not know exactly, they may have heard of it, but that's as far as it goes. Well, it's a Christian charity. It partners with churches in more than 50 of the world's poorest countries. Most of its money, the vast majority, comes from churches like our own. So churches supporting churches across the world. They tackle poverty and injustice through sustainable development, by responding to disasters and challenging injustice. And they believe that an end to extreme poverty is possible. And they point out that actually so many people living in abject poverty is not part of God's plan for the world. And God is calling all of us to reach out to people in the greatest need. And they partner with local churches and organisations who have a crucial role to play in the places worst affected by poverty. Next one, please. That's stark, isn't it? Poverty is not God's plan for this world. We are the churches. Tearfund believes that all of us can play a part in ending extreme poverty by reaching out to people in need. And Tearfund has been going for more than 50 years. It was originally the Evangelical Alliance Relief Fund. That's where the tear comes from. It is since obviously no longer part of that, but it was formed really back in the 60s in the response to the Biafra. Those of us who are a bit older will remember that one of the first times that horrific famine was seen on our screens. And Tearfund was born out of a desire to do something, have a Christian response to that and to subsequent disasters. Okay, so their goal is to equip people to lift themselves out of poverty, and that's always been what they've wanted to do. And crucially, they want them to fulfill their God-given potential. One of their strap lines is to follow Jesus where the need is greatest. That's their major thing. Wherever the need is greatest, they want to be Jesus to those people. So, what do they do? Well, they meet emergency needs. Well, because they already have churches in the area, the churches get the money to distribute to their particular communities. They mobilise churches. We've also had this same thing where you want to do something, but you don't really feel you've got the resources to do it. You can see the need, but you don't know how to do it. You haven't got the money, you haven't got the know-how. I mean, this was certainly the case when for SYP, when it started up years ago. We could see the need, but how are we going to help that? We know what the need is. We need to be equipped. So it is with these churches throughout the world. They need to be equipped, envisioned, and empowered to play their own part in developing and transforming their communities. So the overall aim is to make people resilient so that the next time a disaster comes, next time, year on year out, as they experience bad rains, no rains, and everything else, that they have the resources to actually move forward and thrive, not just to give up and die, and change society. This is something that has become perhaps more prevalent in recent years. They seek to influence and change social, political and economic systems and policies so that poorest communities can get the services and the opportunities they need to thrive. They advocate on behalf of the poor, climate change, injustice, rights of women, all sorts of things, and they advocate and they lobby at the highest levels of government. And their value, well, actually, the bottom line is, as Christians, we follow Jesus' example. We seek to be Christ-centred, compassionate, courageous, truthful, and servant-hearted in everything we do. And I think that would be a statement that many of us would hope that we can emulate as well. I think that was the last one. Yes. So that's a little bit about Tearfund, its values, where it works, how it works, just its whole ethos. So now we're going to watch, hopefully, Ian, a film made from Nepal about what Tearfund is doing in Nepal. We have to press play together. Yeah. It helps.
The rainy season in Nepal has faded and hope is drying up. Crops and livestock are dying as the climate crisis causes families in Nepal to struggle to realize their dreams. Trapped by hunger and poverty, communities are withering away as people move to cities to survive, abandoning generations of farming. A way of life is fading, but your support will help them find the freedom to grow again.
My name is Mahima, and I live here with my husband and 3 young children where we farm to produce crops. In the past, there used to be periodic rains. The heat would not be extreme, but now it is too hot in the summer and too cold in the winter. I don't know much about climate change, but we feel it. If it rained, the harvest would be good. Otherwise, it would be poor. So we kept looking up into the sky, hoping for rainfall.
Tearfund's local partners, working through community churches, are equipping farmers like Mahima to adapt to changing weather patterns caused by the climate crisis. New irrigation systems can make them less dependent on the rains. The land has the potential to flourish again, and with it, hope. Tearfund's partner also provided relief goods during the lockdown and goats to help diversify Mahima's farm.
After starting the irrigation, we realized that we can grow potatoes despite the lack of occasional rains. We have seen positive signs and are getting a good harvest. I have learned to cultivate the land. We have to improve our livelihood and even sell some of my vegetables when there is a market. Now we have goats and my husband is preparing to start poultry farming, so I am happy now. We have to work hard, but we can eat happily, and in the future, I would love to cultivate wheat, maize, potato, and apples.
Families and businesses are now returning to communities as the sense of excitement in these life-bringing changes enables whole communities to flourish. Your gift this harvest will help local churches to support communities around the world to overcome poverty, empowering them to grow to their full potential. 88 pounds could help set up a new water irrigation system, enabling local farmers like Mahima to adapt to the climate crisis.
All these things were created by God, so it's our responsibility to use them properly. I feel happy to see the crops growing and feel hopeful for a better future.
I don't know if anybody has been to Nepal. I have. And seeing the state of the land and the dryness, where once I walked, and seeing what was an abundantly green environment is incredibly shocking. It is perhaps places that are on the edge of the desert, and you see from other countries around the world, you see the desert encroaching, but there was desert, and it's not as shocking. But to see it would be like Devon suddenly becoming a desert. Somewhere that we see as lush and green and verdant, suddenly everything within a couple of years withering away and there being nothing and being unable to farm. It was an incredibly green and verdant land where people could, 85% of Nepalese people are subsistence farmers. They're very poor, but they could eat. But it was terribly shocking when I saw the film to see the massive difference that there is in that country and how people who were once able to feed themselves and get by now can't. We think of Nepal, don't we? Think of Nepal, the Himalayas, and envisage pictures, and you still see the high mountains in the background, and you see the beautiful green. It's all in paddy fields, it's terraced, it's incredibly beautiful. You could see the terraces there, and normally they would all be just a patchwork of different greens. But as we've seen on there, it's becoming a place of drought. And as Mahima said, when the rains fail, hope dries up along with the ground. Crops and livestock die, and communities shrivel as people are forced to move to cities just to survive. And their whole way of life for what is 85% of the people of Nepal is fading. And they move to the cities to survive, but sadly the more people that move to the cities, the worse the problem becomes there, and it transfers over. And that's not how it should be. It's not how God intends it to be. As we saw earlier, poverty is not God's plan. We are the churches. And as the body of Christ, we are invited to be God's hands and feet, joining with his great story of restoration. Part of building God's kingdom is making sure that people, all people, have the freedom to dream, the freedom to be who God created them to be, and the freedom to grow. And organisations like Tearfund are making that happen in places like Nepal and in 50 other countries or more around the world. And they ask us to join them and play our part too. Tens of millions of people across the world, probably even more than that, it's probably in the billions now. Extreme weather events can mean losing their homes, their food, their livelihoods. And we know, don't we, that people living in extreme poverty are being hit by the climate crisis the hardest. Something has to be done. We can't just wait for governments to sort out how they're going to limit the climate, the temperature changes. We can't wait for governments to say we're going to do this and do that. Well, even if they say it, will they do it? Will they mobilise? But we can't afford, these people can't afford to wait. And it starts with churches like ours supporting Tearfund, deciding that we're actually, in some small way, going to take action, just as the young boy in our story brought 5 loaves and 2 fish. Very small. The problem was immense, but in Jesus' hands, a miracle was wrought. And by supporting Tearfund's Harvest appeal, we together as a community can give people in poverty the freedom to grow and change and step into their God-given potential. Because if it's not us, if we don't, then who will? And if not now, then when? And we have the opportunity to make a difference as a church, to answer our calling and be a blessing to others. Climate crisis is an injustice, and part of our DNA of who we are is to challenge injustice wherever that might be. People in this country living without resources to feed themselves is an injustice. And we respond in the way we can, and God asks us to respond in the way we can to help those around the world. And Tearfund asks us to join with them. Well, how do they ask us to help them? Well, they ask us to pray, to give, and to act. One of the things Tearfund says is actually the money obviously makes a huge difference, but it's our prayers. It's our prayers that underpin everything that they do and everything that they're able to do. So first and foremost, they want us to pray, and that's how we are going to start our time of reflection on how we can respond to this appeal. Sorry, Ian, I think we need to finish that. Yep, there we go. That's the one. Lovely. Thank you. Go to the next one. So they ask us to pray. Pray in solidarity for our brothers in Nepal. They sowed fields and planted vineyards that yielded a fruitful harvest. He blessed them, and their numbers increased greatly, and he did not let their herds diminish. That was the prayer of the psalmist in our call to worship. And that's their prayer, that that's what they want to be able to do. Next one, please. Mahima said, I like this verse very much. Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. She says, whatever we ask, we pray to Jesus Christ. And when we needed this water irrigation system in place, we knocked and we asked. And you, Tearfund, you, us, someone like us, you helped us. So the money that we give can answer their prayers. Since the irrigation came, she said, we don't have to worry now that we get to eat organic, which made me smile. It's true, from our own farm. So we will bring our prayers to God for the people in Nepal. So our prayers join together as a powerful response to the problem as we cry out to our God. So can I invite you to write your prayers for Nepal on the green, specifically green pieces of post-it notes. Pens are available, and some people that come around. And I just ask that you will, when you've written your prayer, around the tree. If you would want more than the one you've been given, there are extras, most certainly, which you can put up here. So, can you just click that forward? Sorry. I've obviously prepared what you need. And things to concentrate your mind on. Because trapped by hunger and poverty, communities are withering away. But our prayers could help them, help give them the freedom to grow. Think about what actually their communities are now lacking, as well as obviously the food, and what their thriving, healthy community will look like. And pray for those. And they give some suggestions that a healthy community can be anything from schools and healthcare to job opportunities, to support for those who have nothing, a flourishing church, and safety for women and girls. There are so many things that we take for granted in a flourishing society that a withering society doesn't have, is not able to do. They do not have the spare capacity to set up these things, because actually the need for food is so overwhelming. So let us bring our prayers, and I invite you, when you've written them, to come and put them around the tree, so that the tree of prayer is growing, just as the crops are growing in Mahima's community, and will be growing in other communities like hers around the world.